Get off this plane right now. You don't belong here. The words cut through the crowded cabin like thunder. Heads turned. Some passengers gasped. Others whispered. A young black boy, barely 12 years old, stood frozen near his assigned seat, his boarding pass trembling in his hand. The flight attendant's voice was sharp, cold, and filled with something more than rules. It was judgment. She had already told him twice, but this time she raised her voice so everyone could hear. You can't sit here. Don't you see the seat is reserved? People like you don't belong in this row. The boy's heart pounded in his chest. His clothes weren't new, an old hoodie, worn sneakers, and jeans that had faded from too many washes. He clutched a small backpack, all he owned for the journey. The seat number on his ticket matched exactly where he stood, but no one seemed to care. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered that maybe he had stolen a boarding pass. Others looked away, not wanting to get involved. A woman in pearls sneered. He shouldn't even be on this flight. The boy's lips trembled as he tried to speak. Ma'am, this is my seat. It says 14A. He held out the ticket for her to see, but she didn't look at it. Instead, she folded her arms and glared. You're lying. You don't belong here. Step aside, or I'll have security remove you. And then, just as the humiliation reached its peak, just as the boy thought he'd be dragged off the plane in front of everyone, a tall man in a dark suit appeared at the front of the cabin. His presence made even the crew go quiet. His eyes scanned the scene, sharp and serious. It was the airline CEO. The man had boarded quietly, intending to take a seat in the back to observe customer service firsthand, unnoticed. But now, what he saw made him stop in his tracks. His eyes fell on the trembling boy, the angry flight attendant, and the divided passengers. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. Your thoughts matter. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this. The CEO's voice was calm but commanding. What seems to be the problem here? The flight attendant stammered, suddenly nervous. Sir, this boy, he doesn't belong in this seat. He's trying to sit in a section that isn't for him. The CEO's eyes narrowed. He looked at the boy, then at the ticket in his hand. He reached out slowly, gently, and took the ticket to read it. His face hardened as he confirmed the truth. The boy did belong in that seat. The cabin was dead silent. Everyone leaned forward, waiting to see what the powerful man would say. The boy's throat was dry. His eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. The CEO turned back toward the flight attendant, his voice low but filled with steel. You just made a very big mistake. And before anyone could understand what was about to happen next, the story must begin. 2 days earlier, Jamal Evans had been sitting on the front steps of a rundown apartment building in Newark, New Jersey. His sneakers were scuffed, his hoodie too thin for the morning chill. The city buzzed with buses, honking cars, and shouting voices, but Jamal's mind was far away. He held an envelope in his hand. It wasn't just paper, it was a dream. Inside was a plane ticket, something he had never held before in his life. It was a one-way ticket to Dallas, Texas, where his aunt lived. She had saved for months to bring him over, hoping to give him a better life after his mom fell sick. Jamal had never been on a plane before. In fact, he had never even been inside an airport. For him, fly was something rich people did, people who live in houses with big cars and shiny shoes. Not boys who carried all their belongings in one backpack. Still, that little ticket gave him hope. But hope was always fragile in Jamal's world. As he sat there, a group of older kids from the block walked past. One of them spotted the ticket peeking out of the envelope and laughed. What's that, Jamal? You think you're rich now? Gonna fly with the big boys? Jamal quickly tucked it back inside, clutching the envelope to his chest. It's just a bus ticket, he lied. But they didn't believe him. They shoved him around, taunting him, until an old woman from across the street shouted, Leave that boy alone before I call the cops. The kids scattered, cursing under their breath. Jamal sighed in relief, then looked up to see the old woman walking toward him. She was bent with age, her hair wrapped in a scarf, but her eyes were sharp and kind. You can't be flashing things like that around here, child, she said softly. Not everyone wants to see you do better. Jamal nodded. Yes, ma'am. The woman sat beside him on the steps. That paper in your hand, it must be important. Jamal hesitated, then showed her the ticket. For some reason, he trusted her. She smiled when she saw it. A plane ticket. My, you're going places, boy. Don't let anyone take this from you. You hear me? Jamal's chest warmed at her words. No one had ever spoken to him like that. He nodded again, more firmly this time. Yes, ma'am. I won't. That night, Jamal barely slept. He packed his backpack 3 times, checking and rechecking that the ticket was safe. He carried his mom's photo, a pair of socks, a sandwich wrapped in foil, and the one book he loved, a worn copy of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. The next morning, he hugged his mom goodbye. She was too weak to travel, her illness leaving her pale and tired. She pressed his face in her hands and whispered, "Be strong, Jamal. Remember, no matter how the world treats you, you carry dignity inside. Don't ever let anyone take that from you." Her words echoed in his heart as he boarded the bus to the airport. The airport itself was overwhelming. Bright lights, shiny floors, people rushing everywhere with rolling suitcases. Jamal walked slowly, eyes wide, afraid of getting lost. He clutched his backpack tightly, keeping the ticket close to his chest. Security was confusing. He had never taken off his shoes in public before. He fumbled with the bins, earning annoyed sighs from the people behind him. But eventually, he made it through. For the first time, he saw the massive planes through glass windows. His breath caught. They were like giants, silver birds waiting to leap into the sky. He whispered to himself, "I'm really gonna fly." When it was time to board, Jamal lined up with the other passengers. He felt their eyes on him, the scuffed sneakers, the old hoodie. Some people looked at him with pity, others with suspicion. He tried to ignore it, but the weight of their stares pressed heavy on his shoulders. Finally, he stepped inside the plane. The air smelled of coffee and recycled air. He held his ticket up, searching for a seat. His heart pounded with excitement and nerves. That was when everything changed. The flight attendant stopped him halfway down the aisle. At first, she asked for his boarding pass, but as soon as she looked him up and down, her expression hardened. "This isn't your seat," she snapped, though the number matched. Jamal explained nervously, showed her the ticket, but she didn't believe him. Passengers began to whisper, some agreeing with her, others staying silent. Jamal's cheeks burned with shame. And then came the words that shook him. "Get off this plane right now. You don't belong here." The humiliation struck like lightning. Jamal wanted to disappear. The plane felt smaller, the walls closing in. Everyone was watching him, judging him. And that was the moment the CEO entered the scene. He didn't just see a boy. He saw the cruelty, the injustice, the unfairness of the world playing out in front of him. He saw the way people judge not by truth, but by appearance. And when he said, "You just made a very big mistake," the air in the cabin shifted. Every passenger held their breath. And Jamal's fate hung in the balance. What the CEO would do next could change everything. But before anyone could hear his next words, the plane doors opened, and someone unexpected walked in. The doors of the plane hissed open, breaking the heavy silence that had gripped the cabin. Every eye turned toward the entrance. A new figure stepped inside, a woman in her late 60s with a cane in her hand and determination in her eyes. She wore a simple floral dress, her gray hair pulled into a bun. She looked nothing like the powerful CEO standing near row 14, but the aura she carried silenced even the whispers. She was the same old woman who had warned Jamal on the apartment steps days before. Jamal's breath caught in his throat. How could she be here? His mind spun with confusion, yet he felt a strange sense of comfort seeing her again. Her presence was like a thread connecting his rough neighborhood to this polished cabin, but her eyes were not soft this time. They burned with fire. "Excuse me," the woman said firmly, her cane clicking against the floor as she walked up the aisle. "I couldn't help but overhear from the gate when the shouting began, and I will not sit quietly while a child is humiliated for nothing more than clothes on his back." The passengers shifted again, murmurs growing louder. Some were uncomfortable with the confrontation. Others, though, began to nod, as if someone had finally spoken what they felt but were too afraid to say. The flight attendant stiffened. "Ma'am, please take your seat. This doesn't concern you." "Oh, but it does," the old woman shot back. "Because when you decide who belongs and who doesn't, when you look at a child and see only poverty instead of a person, it concerns all of us. This is more than a seat. This is dignity." Jamal's throat tightened. He wanted to thank her, but the words wouldn't come. The CEO's eyes flickered between the boy, the woman, and his own employee. His face revealed nothing, but something was shifting behind his calm exterior. "Enough," the CEO said finally, his voice steady. "The boy has a valid ticket. He will remain in his seat." The tension snapped like a rope pulled too tight. Some passengers clapped quietly. Others looked away, embarrassed. The flight attendant's face went red, but she forced a stiff nod and muttered, "Yes, sir." Jamal slid into 14A, his hand shaking as he buckled the seatbelt. The old woman gave him a small nod of encouragement before moving toward her own seat. For the first time since boarding, Jamal felt like he belonged, even if it was only because two strangers had stood for him. But peace never lasted long in Jamal's life. As the passengers settled, a man from the row across leaned closer. His suit was expensive, his watch shining. He sneered at Jamal and whispered just loud enough for others to hear. "Probably a charity case. Can't believe they let just anyone sit here now." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread among a few nearby passengers. Jamal stared down at his hands, gripping the seatbelt so tightly his knuckles turned white. He thought about his mother's words. You carry dignity inside. But holding on to dignity felt impossible when the world chipped away at it piece by piece. The CEO overheard the remark. His jaw tightened. But instead of responding, he scribbled something in a notebook he carried. No one knew it yet, but he was recording everything. Every word, every action. He wasn't just a CEO traveling incognito anymore. He was a witness. The engines roared to life. The plane rumbled down the runway, lifting into the sky with a force that made Jamal's stomach lurch. For the first time, he looked out of the window and saw the ground shrinking beneath him. Buildings became toy blocks, cars like ants. His breath caught in awe. He whispered to himself, "I'm flying." It was a small moment of wonder, a low in a wave of drama, but one Jamal would never forget. The sky stretched endless and blue, and for a brief time he felt free, above the streets that tried to trap him, above the voices that told him he wasn't enough. But the calm was shattered again not long after takeoff. Halfway into the flight, the same flight attendant returned to Jamal's row. She leaned down, her voice low and sharp. "You better behave yourself, or you'll find yourself in trouble when we land. Don't think just because the boss is watching you're safe." Jamal's heart pounded. He nodded quickly, too scared to argue. But the old woman across the aisle wasn't asleep, as the attendant had assumed. She opened her eyes, glaring. "You will not threaten this boy," the woman said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. "Do your job, which is to serve passengers, not strip them of their worth." The attendant's face darkened. She straightened quickly and stalked down the aisle. This time, more passengers began to murmur in Jamal's defense. A man in a baseball cap muttered, "She's got a point. That was out of line." A young mother whispered to her child, "See, we must always be kind." It was subtle, but something was changing. The crowd that once stayed silent was beginning to shift. For Jamal, though, the fear lingered. He pressed his forehead against the cool window, wishing his mom were beside him, wishing someone could explain why people hated him for nothing he did. Hours passed. Snacks were served, movies played on tiny screens, and laughter bubbled here and there. The normal rhythm of a flight resumed. But Jamal never shook the feeling of being watched. Near the end of the flight, the CEO stood and addressed the cabin. It was unusual. CEOs didn't make announcements midair, but his voice carried authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, I boarded this flight today to see how my airline truly treats its customers. What I have witnessed has shocked me. A young passenger, with every right to be here, was denied dignity simply because of his appearance. That will not be tolerated. Not now, not ever. The cabin grew still. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably. Others looked at Jamal with new eyes, guilt flickering in their expressions. The CEO paused and added, "When we land, changes will be made. This company is built to serve people, not judge them." Jamal's chest swelled with something new, not just relief, but hope. Maybe the world wasn't always cruel. Maybe sometimes the powerful did see the powerless. The old woman across the aisle gave him a small smile, and for a moment, Jamal allowed himself to believe things would be different. But then, just as the plane began its descent, preparing to land in Dallas, chaos struck. A man from the back of the plane suddenly stood, his face red with anger. He pointed at Jamal and shouted, "This is ridiculous. That boy doesn't deserve special treatment. People like him don't belong in our space." Gasps erupted across the cabin. The man's words sliced through a fragile hope that had begun to build. The flight attendant who had humiliated Jamal earlier rushed toward him, trying to calm the situation, but her face betrayed a twisted satisfaction at his outburst. Jamal froze in his seat, fear gripping him. His hands shook as he tried to disappear into the window. The old woman rose slowly, leaning on her cane, but before she could speak, the man lunged down the aisle toward Jamal. Passengers screamed. The plane jolted slightly as the commotion erupted, and at that exact moment, the seatbelt sign dinged on, warning everyone to sit. But no one was sitting. The CEO leapt forward, his face fierce. The old woman lifted her cane as if ready to block the path. Jamal's breath came fast, trapped between terror and disbelief. The man's hand reached out toward Jamal's shoulder, and that was when the entire cabin heard the sharp crack of something breaking. The sound echoed through the air, leaving everyone frozen in shock. What had just broken? Who had struck first? The answer would decide whether this flight ended in safety or in disaster. The sharp crack echoed like thunder through the cabin. For a split second, no one breathed. Heads whipped toward the aisle where the man had lunged. Jamal squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for pain. But when he opened them, he realized it wasn't his body that had taken the blow. The old woman's cane had snapped in two, splintering as she swung it across the man's path. The jagged wooden piece clattered the floor, rolling under a seat. Gasps filled the air. The man stumbled back, more from surprise than pain, glaring at the old woman. "You crazy hag," he roared. "Stay out of this." The old woman, though trembling from the effort, stood her ground. Even without the cane's support, she planted her feet like roots in the earth. "I will not," she said, her voice steady. "Not when you try to harm a child." The man's chest heaved with fury. He took another step forward, but this time he didn't reach for Jamal. His eyes narrowed on the old woman as if she had just become his target. Jamal's heart hammered. He couldn't let her take the blow meant for him. Before he even thought about it, Jamal blurted, "Leave her alone. You want someone, take me." His voice cracked, but it rang clear enough for the cabin to hear. The passengers erupted into chaos. Some shouted for order, others begged the man to sit down. A few fumbled for their phones, recording everything, the red dots of their cameras flashing like warnings. The CEO moved swiftly, stepping between the old woman and the furious man. His presence was commanding, his voice booming above the panic. "Sit down, now." But the man didn't listen. He pushed forward, trying to shove past. That was when two other passengers, a tall man in a baseball cap and a younger woman traveling with her child, leapt from their seats. They grabbed the angry man's arms, holding him back. He struggled violently, cursing and spitting, but he couldn't break free. The flight attendant hurried over, her face pale. She called for the captain over the intercom. Within moments, two strong-looking crew members joined in, helping restrain the man. They forced him back into his seat, buckling him in and securing his wrists with ties meant for unruly passengers. The cabin buzzed with shock and adrenaline. People whispered about what just happened, shaking their heads, some in disgust, others in fear. Children cried softly in the background, clinging to their parents. Through it all, Jamal sat frozen in his seat, staring at the broken cane lying on the floor. His chest rose and fell quickly, his palms sweaty. He had never seen someone stand up for him so fiercely, not even risking their own safety. And now, because of him, an old woman's only support was snapped in half. "Are you all right?" the CEO asked her, bending down. She nodded, though her knees trembled. "I've lived through worse. But no child should be treated this way in my presence. Not while I still breathe." Her words struck Jamal deeper than any insult ever had. He felt a lump rise in his throat, tears threatening to spill. But he clenched his jaw, forcing them back. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. "Don't ever let the world take your dignity." The CEO picked up the broken cane and set it gently on the seat beside her. Then he turned to the passengers. His voice was strong, clear, undeniable. "This flight will land in Dallas in 30 minutes. Security will be waiting for this man. Until then, everyone remain seated. And let me be absolutely clear, no child, no matter their clothes or background, will ever be humiliated or endangered on one of my planes again." The declaration sent a ripple through the cabin. Some clapped nervously. Others shifted with unease. But Jamal knew one thing. Something had changed. He wasn't invisible anymore. For the rest of the descent, the plane was eerily quiet. Passengers stole glances at Jamal, some with shame, others with curiosity. The man who had been restrained fumed silently in his seat, his face red with rage, but unable to move. The old woman leaned across the aisle, her voice soft now. "Don't carry fear in your heart, boy. Fear eats at the soul. Carry courage instead." Jamal nodded, though he wasn't sure he had any courage left. His hand still shook. When the wheels touched the ground in Dallas, the cabin erupted with relieved applause, the kind that always came at the end of a safe flight, but this time mixed with the tension of what had just happened. But the drama wasn't over. As the plane taxied toward the gate, the restrained man shouted again, his voice loud enough to echo. "This isn't over. That boy doesn't belong here. He's nothing but trash." Gasps filled the cabin once more. Jamal's chest tightened. No matter how many times he heard words like that, they still cut like knives. The CEO stepped forward, his voice cold. "Be quiet. Your words mean nothing here." The man only laughed bitterly. "We'll see about that." The plane came to a stop. Police officers and airline security waited just outside the gate. The moment the door opened, they boarded and went straight for the restrained passenger. He struggled, shouting curses, but they dragged him off swiftly. The cabin exhaled in relief. Passengers began to gather their bags, the routine chaos of landing resuming. But for Jamal, nothing felt normal. His body was heavy with exhaustion, his mind spinning. As he stood, clutching his backpack, the old woman came beside him, her steps slow without her cane. "Come, child, I'll walk with you." The CEO was close behind. He wasn't just letting the situation slide into silence. He wanted to see it through. They stepped off the plane into the bright, bustling airport. The polished floors reflected the overhead lights. The chatter of passengers filled the air, but Jamal felt exposed under all the stares. Whispers followed him, like shadows he couldn't shake. The old woman reached out, gently holding his arm for support. Her grip was firm, steady, despite her frailty. "You hold your head high," she whispered. "They can whisper all they want. That doesn't change who you are." But just as Jamal took a deep breath to steady himself, an unexpected sight stopped him cold. At the gate, standing with worried eyes, was a woman he hadn't seen in years. She was tall, her hair braided neatly, her arms stretched wide. His aunt. Jamal's heart leapt. Relief washed over him. He wanted to run into her arms, to feel safe for the first time in forever. But before he could move, another voice cut through the crowd. It was deep, mocking, and all too familiar. Well, look who finally thinks he can fly." Jamal froze. His body went rigid. That voice belonged to someone from his old neighborhood, someone who had made his life miserable, someone who had once sworn he'd deal with him if he ever got too big for his place. And now, that person stood right there in the Dallas airport, blocking the path. The old woman gasped. The CEO stiffened. Jamal's aunt looked confused but alarmed as the man smirked, stepping closer. The boy's journey was far from safe. The flight might have ended, but the real danger had only just begun. The crowd at the Dallas airport bustled with energy as passengers spilled out from the gate. Families reunited. Business people hurried with phones in hand, and children tugged on parents' sleeves, eager to reach baggage claim. But in the middle of it all, Jamal froze. The voice cut through the noise like a knife. Well, look who finally thinks he can fly. Jamal's head snapped toward the sound. His stomach twisted when he saw the man leaning against a pillar, arms crossed, a sly grin stretching across his face. It was Rico, one of the older kids from his block back in Newark. Rico wasn't just any bully. He was the one who had always singled Jamal out, mocking him for his clothes, stealing his lunch money, daring him to stay in his lane. He had once warned Jamal that if he ever tried to act better than the rest, he'd regret it. Jamal thought he'd escaped that shadow when he boarded the plane. But now, Rico was here hundreds of miles away waiting. Jamal's legs felt like stone. His aunt's voice broke through the tension. "Jamal!" She stepped forward, her eyes filling with tears. She opened her arms, ready to pull him close. But Rico's grin widened. He stepped into their path, blocking Jamal's way. "What's the rush? We got some catching up to do, don't we, little man?" Gasps rippled through nearby passengers as they realized a confrontation was brewing. Some slowed their pace, curious. Others hurried away, not wanting to get involved. The old woman, standing beside Jamal, gripped his arm tighter. Her cane was gone, but her presence was unshakable. "Step aside," she said firmly. Rico chuckled. "Oh, so you got yourself a bodyguard now? Cute." He leaned closer, his voice dropping low so only Jamal could hear. "You think flying away makes you different? Makes you better? Nah, you'll always be the same scared little boy." The clatter of the metallic object still echoed in Jamal's ears. His wide eyes stayed fixed on it, lying on the tile just inches from his sneakers. A gun, a heavy black pistol that gleamed beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. His throat tightened. He wanted to move, but his legs were frozen stiff. The hooded figures stormed inside, their movements fast and deliberate. One of them shouted, "There he is!" His voice, muffled beneath the cloth mask, carried through the chaos. Jamal's aunt pulled him backward with all her strength. "Get behind me!" she cried, her voice shrill with terror. But her arms shook, and her small frame was no shield against three determined attackers. The old woman's cane was gone, yet she still stepped forward instinctively, as if her frail body could somehow protect the boy. Her voice rang out, "Not here, not today." The CEO planted himself like a wall between the figures and Jamal. His tailored suit was now wrinkled and sweat-stained, but his presence radiated command. "Back off," he roared, his deep voice slicing through the noise. But the hooded men didn't stop. One lunged for the pistol on the floor. Jamal's instincts finally kicked in. Before he could even think, his foot shot out. He kicked the gun with all his strength, sending it skidding across the tiles, far out of reach. Gasps erupted around him. The man cursed, diving after it, but it slid beneath a row of bolted-down airport chairs. That single act of defiance shifted everything. The nearest hooded figure snarled and grabbed for Jamal instead. His gloved hand closed around Jamal's hoodie, yanking him forward. Jamal's chest slammed into the man's side. The boy struggled, kicking, thrashing, desperate to break free. "Let him go," his aunt screamed. She clawed at the man's arm, but he shoved her aside brutally. She stumbled and nearly fell, catching herself on a pillar. The CEO lunged, grabbing the man's wrist. They grappled violently, the man trying to pull Jamal away, the CEO using every ounce of strength to hold on. Grunts and curses mingled with the chaos around them. The second hooded figure pulled something from his hoodie, a long metal pipe. He swung it wildly, forcing bystanders back. People shrieked, ducking and scattering as he cleared space around the struggle. The third man scanned the crowd, clearly watching for security. "Hurry it up," he shouted. Jamal's chest burned. His mind screamed with panic, but another voice, his mother's, rang clearer. "You carry dignity inside. Don't ever let anyone take it from you." He kicked again, harder, slamming his sneaker into the man's shin. The attacker grunted, his grip loosening just enough for Jamal to wrench himself free. He stumbled backward into his aunt's arms, gasping for breath. But the danger was far from over. The first man, furious, shoved the CEO back. The tall executive staggered, but caught himself. His jaw clenched, his fist balled, ready to fight again if necessary. The old woman's voice rose above the dense security. "Over here," she cried, her frail arms waving desperately. Finally, whistles shrieked. 2 TSA officers rushed into view, followed closely by the same police officers from earlier. Their weapons weren't drawn yet, but their hands hovered over their holsters, shouting commands. "Drop the weapon. Hands where we can see them." The man with the metal pipe hesitated, his eyes darting around as the terminal echoed with authority. The other 2 shifted nervously, calculating their odds. Rico appeared at the entrance then, leaning casually against the wall, watching with a smirk. He didn't intervene, but his eyes locked on Jamal, cold and unrelenting. It was clear he had orchestrated this. "Don't just stand there," one hooded man barked at Rico. But Rico only shrugged, his grin widening. He enjoyed the spectacle too much to dirty his hands. The police advanced. "Last warning. Drop it now." The man with the pipe cursed, then hurled it violently across the floor. It clanged against a wall and spun to a stop. His hand shot up. The other 2 followed, grudgingly raising their arms. "On the ground. Face down," the officers commanded. Slowly, reluctantly, the men complied, lying flat on tiles. Handcuffs clicked moments later. The crowd, still shaken, erupted into a mix of relieved sighs and applause. Parents clutched their children tighter. Strangers whispered about what they had just witnessed. But Jamal didn't feel relief. His chest heaved, his palms trembled, and his eyes darted back to Rico. Because Rico wasn't running. He wasn't even nervous. He simply winked at Jamal, mouthed something. 2 words that froze Jamal's blood. "Not over." Then Rico turned casually, blending into the dispersing crowd, gone before security could notice. The aftermath was chaos of a different kind. Questions flew from airport officials. Passengers gave shaky statements, and the detained men were dragged away. Jamal sat on a bench, his aunt's arm wrapped tightly around his shoulders. The CEO stood nearby, giving calm but firm answers to the police. The old woman stayed close too, her hand resting lightly on Jamal's knee as though anchoring him to the present. Reporters had already gathered, cameras flashing, microphones shoved forward. Someone had recorded everything, and already the story was spreading like wildfire online. Child attacked at Dallas airport. CEO intervenes in violent confrontation. Airport chaos caught on video. The headlines would multiply, but Jamal didn't care. His focus was locked on Rico's last words. "Not over." His aunt noticed his distant stare. She tilted his chin gently toward her. "Baby, look at me. You're safe now. Do you hear me? Safe." But Jamal couldn't answer. Safe was a word that had slipped too far out of reach. The CEO crouched down so he was level with Jamal. His stern features softened. "You were brave today. Braver than many grown men I know. Don't forget that." Jamal swallowed hard, but he said it's not over. The CEO's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't dismiss the boy's fear. Instead, he nodded. "Then we'll be ready. You're not alone anymore." The old woman leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes shadows follow us, child, but shadows vanish when you keep walking toward the light." Jamal let the words sink in, though fear still gnawed at him. Hours later, after statements and paperwork, they finally left the airport. The Dallas sun blazed overhead as they stepped into the parking lot. His aunt's car, a modest silver sedan, waited near the curb. Jamal slid into the back seat, exhausted. His body ached from the struggle, his mind reeling with everything that had happened since boarding the plane in Newark. He leaned his head against the window, watching planes take off in the distance. For a fleeting moment, he allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, this nightmare was over. But then his phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket, frowning at the unknown number. A text message lit the screen. It read, "This is just the beginning. Jamal's breath hitched. His fingers trembled. He showed the phone to his aunt. Her face drained of color. Who sent that? The CEO leaned forward from the passenger seat, his eyes scanning the message. His jaw tightened. Rico. The old woman, seated beside Jamal in the back, closed her eyes. Her lips moved silently, as though reciting a prayer. Jamal's chest tightened again. He thought he had faced his worst fear at the airport. But now, staring at the glowing message, he realized the truth. The worst was still coming, and it was coming for him. The glow from Jamal's phone screen seemed to burn into his skin. He read the words again and again, hoping maybe he had imagined them. This is just the beginning. His stomach tightened. He turned to his aunt, his eyes wide, searching for answers she couldn't possibly give. She hugged him closer, but her own hands trembled. The CEO took the phone, studied the message carefully, and handed it back. His voice was low, controlled. Turn it off. Right now. Jamal obeyed instantly, powering down the device. But even with the screen black, the words were seared into his mind. The old woman, her face calm but grave, placed a thin hand on Jamal's shoulder. He's trying to poison your spirit with fear. Don't let him. The car started, pulling them away from the airport. The city stretched around them. Skyscrapers reflecting the setting sun, traffic lights flickering red and green. Life outside seemed to go on as normal, but for Jamal, the world had changed forever. The farther they drove, the quieter the car became. The silence pressed heavy on Jamal's chest. He wanted to ask why Rico hated him so much, why he wouldn't leave him alone. But every time the words formed, his throat closed up. Finally, the CEO spoke. He won't stop until someone makes him stop. That's the kind of man Rico is. His jaw clenched as he stared out the window. And that's exactly what we'll do. Jamal's aunt shot him a wary glance. And how do you suggest we do that? He's just a boy. He needs peace, not more danger. The CEO turned to her, his voice firm. If we pretend this will go away, it won't. He'll keep coming. The question is, do we wait for him to strike again, or do we face him on our terms? Jamal shivered. He didn't want to face Rico at all. But a small, stubborn part of him remembered kicking that gun away. Remembered the moment he chose not to freeze. Maybe he wasn't as powerless as he thought. Still, he stayed silent. The sedan pulled into a quiet neighborhood lined with modest houses. His aunt parked in front of a small two-story home with peeling paint on the shutters. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Inside, she said quickly, glancing around as though expecting Rico to appear at any moment. They carried their bags inside. The house smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. Family photos lined hallway walls. Smiling faces, birthdays, graduations, a history of love and struggle. Jamal stared at them, his chest tightening with longing for his mother. Make yourself at home, his aunt said softly. This is your safe place now. But the word safe sounded fragile, like glass that could shatter with the slightest touch. The CEO stepped inside too, closing the door firmly behind him. The old woman lowered herself carefully onto the couch, resting her cane against her knee. Jamal sank beside her, clutching a pillow against his chest. The CEO pulled out his phone. I'm calling in security. Men I trust. Rico won't catch us off guard again. His aunt frowned. Security? Isn't that too much? This is my home, not a fortress. It's not too much, the CEO said flatly. It's necessary. The old woman tilted her head. Protection can guard the body, but who guard the spirit? The room fell silent. Jamal looked down at his hands. He didn't know how to guard anything. Not his body, not his spirit. He was just a boy who wanted to sit on a plane without being judged, without being hated for how poor he looked. He whispered, "Why me? Why does he hate me?" The CEO crouched down so he could meet Jamal's eyes. Because you remind him of everything he's not. You're stronger than you think, Jamal, and that scares him. The words were meant to comfort, but they didn't. Not yet. The night stretched on. Security guards arrived, 2 large men in plain clothes, their eyes scanning every shadow, every creak in the house. They stationed themselves outside, pacing the porch and driveway. Inside, Jamal couldn't sleep. He lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to hum of the refrigerator and the occasional bark of a distant dog. Every sound made him flinch. Every shadow seemed to move. Around midnight, he sat up, restless. The old woman, sitting in a chair nearby, was awake too. Her eyes were closed, lips moving silently as if in prayer. "Can't sleep?" she asked without opening her eyes. Jamal shook his head. "What if he comes tonight?" Her eyes opened, soft and steady. "Then we will face him. Together." Jamal swallowed hard. "But what if I can't do it? What if I freeze?" She reached out, her wrinkled hand covering his. "Courage is not the absence of fear, child. It is moving forward even when fear is heavy on your back." He nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. For the first time since the airport, he felt a flicker of strength. He lay back down, eyes drifting closed. Sleep came fitfully in pieces. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds. The smell of coffee filled the air. His aunt busied herself in the kitchen, trying to pretend life was normal. Jamal sat at the table, chewing on a piece of toast, when a sharp knock rattled the door. The guards moved instantly, hands to their sides. The CEO stepped forward. "Who is it?" he called. No answer. The knock came again, harder this time. Everyone froze. The CEO signaled to one guard, who peered through the peephole. His face darkened. He turned back, voice low. "It's him." Jamal's heart lurched. His toast fell from his hand. The CEO stiffened, ready to act. His aunt clutched Jamal's shoulder, her grip tight. The old woman stood slowly, leaning on her cane, her eyes narrowing with quiet determination. The knock came a third time, booming, insistent. Then a voice. Rico's voice. Smooth, mocking. "Open up. We need to talk." The room seemed to shrink, air growing heavy. Jamal's pulse thundered his ears. He had dreaded this moment, and yet here it was sooner than he imagined. The CEO motioned for silence. The guard shifted into position, ready, but Rico's voice came again, louder. "You can't hide him forever." The word sent a chill down Jamal's spine. And then, crack, the sound of wood splintering. Rico was no longer knocking. He was forcing his way inside. The door shook violently under the impact. Jamal's breath caught. His aunt screamed. The guards drew their weapons. The CEO barked an order. And just as the door groaned under the next strike, the power in the house went out. Darkness swallowed everything. The house fell into instant blackness. 1 second the room was filled with sunlight and the hum of appliances. The next it was swallowed by a suffocating void. The only sound were panicked breaths, a chair scraping the floor, and a heavy pounding against the front door. Crack! The door shuddered again, groaning under the assault. Splinters scattered to the floor. "Flashlights!" the CEO barked. His deep voice cut through the chaos like a lifeline. The two guards moved fast, pulling small tactical lights from their belts. Narrow beams pierced the dark, cutting across the frightened faces in the room. The old woman's eyes reflected the glow, steady despite the terror around her. Jamal clutched the edge of the table, his knuckles white. His aunt wrapped an arm around him, holding him so tight he could barely breathe. But her trembling betrayed the fear she tried to hide. Boom! The door shook violently, hinges screeching. Dust drifted from the frame. "Get them to the back room." The CEO ordered one guard. "Now." The man nodded, grabbing Jamal's aunt's arm. "Come on, ma'am. Move." Jamal resisted at first, his eyes wide. "But—" "No buts," the CEO snapped. "Go." The old woman rose slowly, leaning on her cane, but her steps were steady. "Stay close, child," she murmured to Jamal. They hurried toward the back hallway, flashlights bouncing against the walls. Jamal's heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. Behind him, the sounds of struggle grew louder. The second guard had taken position by the door, weapon drawn, flashlight aimed. "One more hit and it's coming down," he warned. The CEO planted himself beside him, his shoulders squared, eyes burning with determination. Then it happened. Boom. The front door exploded inward, slamming against the wall. Dust and shardwood filled the air. Rico stepped through the wreckage. His hoodie was gone now, replaced by a black jacket. His grin glowed in the beam of the flashlight, sharp and menacing. Two more figures followed him, faces obscured by scarves. "Well," Rico drawled, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Looks like the party's just getting started." The guard shouted, "Stop right there." His gun trained firmly on Rico, but Rico didn't flinch. He lifted his hands slowly, mockingly. "Oh, relax. I only came to talk." The CEO stepped forward, fury etched on his face. "You've crossed the line. This ends tonight." Rico smirked. "You really think you can protect him? You don't know what you're up against." Jamal, watching from the end of the hallway, felt his stomach drop. The man who had haunted him at the airport was now inside his aunt's home, standing just feet away. The guard barked again. "On the ground. Now!" For a moment, Rico looked as though he might comply. His hands hovered in the air, his smirk never fading. Then, in a flash, he signaled his men. Chaos erupted. One of the intruders lunged, tackling the guard with the flashlight. The two men crashed to the floor, the weapon skidding across the tiles. The second intruder hurled something small and metallic. A blinding flash filled the room. Not a full grenade, but a makeshift flashbang. The CO cursed, shielding his eyes. Jamal and his aunt screamed, covering their ears against the deafening crack. The old woman didn't flinch. Her hand tightened on her cane. In the strobing chaos, Rico's grin widened. He moved fast, slipping past the CO, heading straight toward the hallway. Straight toward Jamal. "Run!" the CO roared. Jamal didn't think. He bolted. His aunt stumbled after him, the old woman close behind. Their feet pounded the narrow hallway as the house shook with sounds of fighting. "Out the back!" the guard shouted, his voice muffled in the struggle. They burst into the small back bedroom. A window glowed faintly with daylight. His aunt fumbled with the latch, hand shaking. Behind them, footsteps thundered closer. Jamal's breath came in sharp gasps. His chest burned. The latch stuck. His aunt yanked harder. "It's jammed," she cried. Rico's voice echoed down the hall, closer now. "You can't run forever, boy." Jamal's heart slammed. He glanced around wildly, searching for something, anything. His eyes landed on a wooden chair. Without thinking, he grabbed it, lifted it with all his strength, and hurled it at the window. Glass shattered in a spray of glittering shards. Sunlight poured in. "Go!" Jamal shouted, his voice cracking. His aunt didn't hesitate. She pushed him through the jagged frame first, then climbed after, the old woman right behind. Jamal tumbled onto the grass outside, knees scraping, palms bleeding. His aunt landed next to him, pulling him to his feet. The old woman crawled out last, cane clutched tightly in her hand. But as they scrambled to their feet, Rico appeared in the broken window, his face twisted into a snarl. "You think you can get away?" he shouted. He swung one leg through the frame. Jamal's stomach dropped. Then a deafening gunshot split the air. The CEO's voice roared from inside. "Stay away from him." Rico ducked back instantly, shards of glass raining down as a bullet cracked into the wall inches from his head. His snarl turned into a growl of rage. Jamal's aunt grabbed his hand, pulling him across the yard. "Run. Don't stop." They sprinted toward the fence, grass whipping against their legs, the old woman surprisingly fast despite her age. Behind them, shouts and crashes continued inside the house. They reached the fence. His aunt shoved Jamal up first. He scrambled over, dropping onto the sidewalk. She followed, pulling the old woman up with surprising strength. By the time they landed on the other side, sweat soaked their clothes, lungs burning. For a brief moment, the world seemed still. The neighborhood was quiet, unaware of the battle unfolding inside one of its houses. But Jamal knew it wasn't over. Not yet. They collapsed onto the sidewalk, gasping for breath. His aunt clutched him tightly, whispering, "Thank God! Thank God!" The old woman leaned on her cane, her face pale but determined. "This is not the end, child. This is only another beginning." Jamal stared at the house they had fled. Through the broken window, he could see flickers of movement, hear muffled shouts, and then silence. Too much silence. The front door creaked open. Jamal's blood ran cold. Rico stepped out, slowly, calmly. No scratches on his face, no panic in his stride. He brushed a fleck of dust from his jacket, his smirk firmly back in place. And in his hand, he carried something that made Jamal's chest seize with fear. It was the CEO's wallet. Rico lifted it high, waving it mockingly. Seems your protector isn't as strong as you thought. Jamal's eyes widened. His aunt gasped. The old woman's cane shook slightly in her grip, because the wallet could only mean one thing. The CEO had been taken. The passengers froze, their voices catching their throats as the CEO's sudden words echoed through the cabin. I need to know, right now, who thought it was okay to deny this boy a seat just because of how he looks? The flight attendants exchanged nervous glances. Some shifted uncomfortably, while others tried to stay quiet, hoping the CEO's attention would drift elsewhere. But it didn't. His piercing eyes scanned the aisle, stopping on each uniformed worker like a spotlight searching the guilty. Silence thickened inside the aircraft, as heavy as storm clouds pressing against a metal fuselage. The boy, Jason, sat frozen, his small frame trembling under the weight of so many eyes. The old woman beside him reached out, her hand gently covering his, her voice low but steady. Don't be afraid, she whispered, though her own pulse thudded wildly. The CEO finally spoke again, his tone sharper, carrying the authority of a man who wasn't asking, but demanding. I asked a question, he repeated, and I expect an answer. That moment hung in the air like a stretched rubber band, ready to snap. Every passenger could feel the tension climbing, inch by inch, to a breaking point. And then, one of the younger attendants, a woman with trembling hands, finally stepped forward. It wasn't me, sir, she stammered, her voice shaky. But I know who did it. Gasps rippled through the rows. Jason's eyes widened. The CEO's jaw tightened. The truth was about to spill out, but before she could finish her sentence, another voice cut across the silence, louder, bolder, and angrier. Don't listen to her, snapped a senior flight attendant with perfectly pinned hair and a polished smile. This boy shouldn't even be here. He doesn't belong in this section, and you know it. We're just trying to keep things in order. Passengers erupted into shocked whispers. Some turned toward Jason with pity, others with outrage at the brazen words. The old woman squeezed his hand harder, her face reddening with fury. The CEO, however, did not flinch. He stepped closer, his shoes echoing against the aisle floor, as if each step was a drumbeat of judgment. Are you telling me, he said, his voice dangerously calm, that you decided a child's worth based on the way he looks? The attendant's mouth opened, but no words came out. She stuttered, then fell silent, her face pale. The passengers held their breath. Jason's heart hammered inside his chest. And just as the CEO seemed ready to deliver his verdict, a sudden announcement crackled over the plane's intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've just been informed of an unexpected delay. We'll need to remain on the ground a little longer. The CEO's head whipped toward the cockpit. The passengers groaned. But for Jason, this interruption was both a blessing and a curse. For a moment, the spotlight shifted away from him. But at the same time, the uncertainty only deepened. Why had the captain chosen that exact moment to interrupt? Was it really just a delay or something else? The tension didn't fade. It only grew. The minutes that followed were filled with uneasy whispers. Jason tried to shrink into his seat, wishing he could disappear. The old woman rubbed his back gently, whispering soothing words. Everything's going to be okay, sweetheart, she said softly. But Jason wasn't sure. For the first time, he wondered if maybe they had been right. Maybe he didn't belong here. His shoes were scuffed, his shirt was faded, and compared to the shiny clothes of the other passengers, he stood out like a shadow in the sunlight. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he blinked them back. He didn't want anyone to see him cry. The CEO noticed. He crouched down at Jason's level, lowering his voice so only the boy could hear. Don't let anyone make you believe you're less than them, he said firmly. You belong here just as much as anyone else. Do you understand? Jason nodded weakly, though the lump in his throat kept him from speaking. The old woman smiled faintly. Thank you, she whispered to the CEO. But the unease didn't go away. The passengers could still feel it. An invisible storm brewing inside the cabin. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others shook their heads in disbelief. And then came the low point of the chapter. The moment when hope seemed to sink. One passenger, a man in a sharp suit sitting across the aisle, suddenly stood up. He looked directly at the CEO, his voice dripping with contempt. Sir, with all due respect, some of us pay good money for this flight. We don't need distractions like this boy here. If he can't afford a proper seat, then maybe he doesn't deserve to fly at all. The words hit Jason like a slap. His chest tightened, his eyes burned, and shame spread over him like fire. He ducked his head, fighting tears he couldn't hold back this time. The old woman stood abruptly, her voice fierce. How dare you? He's a child. A child. Is this the kind of world you want to live in, where a boy's dignity is worth less than your ticket price? The passengers buzzed with murmurs, some agreeing with the old woman, others staying silent, unwilling to take sides. The CEO straightened, his expression hardening. Sit down, he told the man coldly, or I'll have you removed from this flight. The man hesitated, then slowly sat down, scowling. But the damage was done. Jason's confidence had cracked even more. The cabin fell into an uneasy quiet again. The air felt heavy, stifling, as though every breath carried the weight of judgment. Just when it seemed like things might calm down, the next extreme event struck. The captain's voice returned on the intercom, sharper this time. Attention, crew. I need security to the cockpit immediately. Gasps exploded from the passengers. Heads swiveled, eyes widened. Security? On this flight? Jason clutched the old woman's hand. The CEO's face darkened. Something was very wrong. And whatever it was about to drag everyone on that plane into deeper chaos than they could have imagined. The tension had only just begun. And before anyone could ask what was happening, the cockpit door suddenly cracked open. A uniformed officer stepped inside the cabin, scanning the rows of passengers. His eyes landed on Jason. And then, with chilling authority, he said the words no one expected. You, boy, come with me. The old woman gasped. The passengers froze. Jason's heart nearly stopped. The CEO shot to his feet, his voice thunderous. What is the meaning of this? But the officer didn't flinch. His hand pointed firmly at Jason, his tone unyielding. I said, the boy, now. The chapter ended in total chaos, the boy's future hanging by a single thread as the cabin erupted into panic, anger, and disbelief. The entire cabin erupted at once. Passengers gasped, some shouted in disbelief, and others sat frozen, unable to comprehend what they had just heard. The uniformed officer stood tall in the aisle, his expression stiff and his fingers still pointing at Jason. You, stand up, he repeated firmly. Jason's heart slammed against his ribs. His chest rose and fell in shallow, panicked breaths. His small hands gripped the armrest of his seat, but his knees shook so violently that he wasn't sure they would support him if he tried to stand. The old woman immediately wrapped her arm protectively around him. You leave this boy alone, she snapped, her voice trembling but fierce. He hasn't done anything wrong. The officer's eyes narrowed. Ma'am, I don't want to repeat myself. Then the CEO stepped forward, his face dark with fury. You answer to me first, he thundered. I am the CEO of this airline, and I demand to know, what reason could you possibly have for ordering a child out of the seat? Every passenger turned toward the confrontation, the air so tense it was hard to breathe. The officer's lips pressed into a thin line. Sir, I've received direct instructions from airport security. This boy needs to be questioned. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Questioned? A woman near the back exclaimed. He's just a kid. Jason's body tensed. He didn't understand why this was happening. His mind raced. Was this about him being denied a seat earlier? Did someone call the police on him? Was it because of his clothes? His stomach churned, and he felt small and powerless in that moment. The old woman hugged him closer. You will not take him, she said, her voice fierce with defiance. The CEO took one step closer to the officer, his voice low but commanding. This boy is staying exactly where he is until you give me a full explanation. And believe me, I will not let this go if you can't justify what you're doing. The passengers erupted in support. Several people clapped. Others shouted, "Leave the boy alone. He hasn't done anything." The officer's jaw tightened. His eyes swept the crowd. Clearly realizing he was outnumbered, he shifted uneasily, but he didn't lower his hand. Jason felt trapped between terror and relief, terrified of being dragged away, yet relieved that so many strangers were standing up for him. But just when it seemed like the standoff might explode into something bigger, the intercom crackled again. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We ask that everyone remain calm. This situation will be resolved shortly. Please stay in your seats." The officer glanced toward the cockpit, then back at the CEO. His voice softened slightly, though still stern. "Sir, I've been told this is a misunderstanding, but I need to confirm something quickly with the boy. Nothing more." The CEO's eyes narrowed. "Then you'll do it right here, in front of everyone." The officer hesitated, then gave a small nod. He turned his gaze on Jason, his tone clipped but less hostile. "Son, do you have your boarding pass?" Jason's lips trembled. He slowly pulled a crumpled slip of paper from his pocket and handed it to the old woman, who gave it to the officer. The man examined it closely, his eyes flickering with confusion. After a tense pause, he handed it back. "This matches," he admitted quietly. "Of course it does," the CEO snapped. "Now sit down before you embarrass yourself further." The officer cleared his throat, adjusted his hat, and without another word, turned and marched back toward the cockpit. The passengers broke into applause, some cheering, others sighing in relief. The old woman hugged Jason tightly, tears brimming in her eyes. "It's over, sweetheart," she whispered. "It's over." But Jason wasn't sure. His heart was still pounding, his hands still shaking. Something told him this wasn't the end of his troubles. It was only the beginning. The flight continued in tense silence for a while. Some passengers struck up conversations to distract themselves, while others kept casting sympathetic glances at Jason. Jason sat quietly, staring at the window. The world outside looked calm, runways stretching into the distance, planes slowly taxiing, clouds drifting lazily overhead. But inside, his mind was anything but calm. The old woman patted his hand. "You see? You didn't do anything wrong. And you don't have to be afraid. People are standing with you." Jason nodded slightly, though the pit in his stomach refused to go away. "Why me?" he whispered. "Why do they keep picking on me?" Her heart ached at the question. She sighed softly. "Because sometimes the world sees only what's on the outside. They don't look at who you are inside. But you mustn't let them break you. You hear me? You are stronger than their judgment." Jason wanted to believe her, but he couldn't shake the fear. What if more people thought he didn't belong? What if something else happened before they even got off the ground? The CEO, now seated near the front, kept glancing back at him. His face remained stern, but his eyes carried something softer, something protective. For a brief time, things seemed to calm down. The attendants, visibly shaken, busied themselves with preparations. The passengers settled, some opening books, others pulling out snacks. Jason leaned his head against the window, his eyes heavy. The rhythm of the engines humming below lulled him, and he drifted into uneasy sleep. But peace never lasted long on this flight. The moment of calm shattered when a shrill scream pierced the cabin. Jason jerked awake, his heart leaping into his throat. Passengers turned in alarm, eyes darting toward the source of sound. Near the back of the plane, a woman stood pointing at something under a seat. Her face was pale, her voice shaking. "There's a bag here, it's not mine. I swear it's not mine." Gasps erupted. Passengers craned their necks, whispering frantically. An abandoned bag? On a plane? The flight attendants rushed over, their faces taut with fear. One of them bent down carefully, pulling the bag into the aisle. The cabin filled with anxious murmurs. Jason clutched the old woman's arm. "What's happening?" he whispered. "I don't know," she said, her eyes fixed on the scene. The CEO shot out of his seat and marched toward the commotion. "Open it," he ordered firmly. "No," another passenger cried. "What if it's dangerous?" The attendants froze, staring at the CEO, waiting. The tension was unbearable. The entire plane seemed to hold its breath. The CEO bent down himself, unzipped the bag, and pulled it open. His expression hardened instantly. Inside, folded neatly, were several expensive suits, and tucked into one pocket was a thick stack of cash. The passengers gasped. But then came the true shock. At the very top of the bag was a piece of paper with Jason's name scribbled on it. All eyes turned toward him at once. Jason froze. His face drained of color. His chest tightened as though invisible hands were squeezing the air out of him. He shook his head violently. "No, that's not mine. I don't even know what that is." The cabin exploded in chaos. Passengers whispered, pointed. Some even glared. The old woman jumped to her feet, furious. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "He's just a child. Someone planted that bag." But the CEO remained silent, his eyes locked on Jason, his expression unreadable. And then, slowly, he said the words that made Jason's blood run cold. "Someone wants this boy to take the blame." The passengers fell silent, stunned. Jason's heart pounded louder than ever before. He didn't understand why someone would target him or what it all meant. But one thing was certain. This flight was no ordinary flight. The danger was real. The game was bigger than he could imagine. And the boy who had only wanted a seat was now at the very center of it. The cabin buzzed with fear and suspicion. Whispers spread like wildfire. Who planted the bag? Why Jason's name? What was really going on? The old woman pulled Jason close, whispering fiercely, "We'll fight this. We'll prove the truth." But Jason, trembling, couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Because this wasn't just about a seat anymore. This was something much, much darker. And as the chapter closed, the CEO's grim voice cut through the silence, sealing the suspense with chilling statement. "No one leaves this plane until we find out who did this." The cabin was so quiet you could hear the engines humming beneath the floor. Every passenger's eyes were locked on the bag lying in the aisle, the slip of paper with Jason's name resting on top like a cruel accusation. Jason's small chest heaved as panic rose inside him. His lips trembled, and his wide eyes darted from the bag to the staring passengers. He shook his head violently. "No, that's not mine," he cried, his voice cracking. "I don't even know what's in there. I swear." The old woman stood protectively in front of him, her frail frame like a shield. Her voice trembled with rage. "This is outrageous. He's a child. Can't you see someone is trying to frame him?" Some passengers muttered in agreement, but others folded their arms, their eyes skeptical. Suspicion spread like wildfire, weaving itself into the tension already choking the cabin. The CEO remained crouched near the bag, his sharp eyes scanning the contents again. He lifted the paper, turning it over in his hands. His voice was low, but clear when he spoke. "This was placed here on purpose," he said, his tone edged with certainty. "And it was meant to point directly at this boy." Gasps rippled across the rows. Jason shrank back into his seat, tears filling his eyes. "But why?" someone shouted. "Why target him?" The CEO didn't answer immediately. He stood slowly, towering over the passengers, his eyes narrowing as if piecing together a puzzle. "That's exactly what we need to find out," he finally said. The officer who confronted Jason earlier returned from the cockpit, his face tight with unease. His eyes fell on the bag and then on Jason, suspicion hardening in his features. "What's this?" he demanded. "Evidence of setup," the CEO shot back. "And you better not lay a hand on this boy until we uncover who's behind it." The officer bristled, clearly uncomfortable being challenged. "Sir, with all due respect, it's procedure to investigate." "Investigate the truth," the CEO cut in sharply. "Not railroading a child because he looks like an easy target." Passengers murmured in approval. The officer clenched his jaw, but he stepped back, realizing the CEO had the crowd support. Jason sat trembling, gripping the old woman's hand. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. Everything felt like a nightmare he couldn't wake from. The tension simmered but didn't explode. The bag was placed near the front under watchful eyes, and for a moment, things calmed just enough for people to breathe again. Jason leaned his head against the old woman's shoulder. She rubbed his back gently, whispering soothing words. "Don't be afraid. You know the truth. We'll hold on to that." Jason swallowed hard. "Why do they hate me so much?" he asked quietly. "Why do they think I don't belong?" Her chest ached at the question. She tilted his chin gently so he'd look at her. "Not everyone hates you. Look around. People clap for you. They defended you. And now, the CEO himself is standing on your side. You must never forget that, even when the world tries to drown you in lies." Jason's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. He wanted to believe her words, but the weight pressing on his chest wouldn't let go. The whispers of the passengers still burned in his ears. From the front, the CEO turned toward the crowd. "Listen carefully, everyone," he said firmly. "Until we know who planted that bag, no one points fingers at this boy again." "Understood." A few people nodded reluctantly. Others avoided his gaze. The old woman squeezed Jason's hand tighter. "See? You're not alone," she whispered. Jason let out a shaky breath. "But what if they never find out who did it?" She paused, then pulled him close. "Then we'll keep fighting until the truth shines. Lies never win forever." Time crawled forward. The plane remained grounded, but the tension in the cabin didn't fully ease. Some passengers whispered among themselves, spinning theories. A few cast lingering glances at Jason, doubt still etched on their faces. But others, moved by the old woman's courage, tried to smile at him, as if silently telling him they believed him. Jason sat quietly, lost in thought. He remembered his mother's words before he left home that morning. "Hold your head high, no matter what." Now, those words felt heavier than ever. The old woman pulled a small candy from her purse and handed it to him. "Here," she said gently. "Something sweet helps the heart." Jason unwrapped it slowly, the simple taste grounding him in the middle of the chaos. For a brief moment, he felt like a kid again. But peace, as always, didn't last long. Just when the cabin seemed to settle, the intercom crackled once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain," came the steady voice. "We've been instructed to remain on the ground due to a possible security threat on board. I ask for your patience as authorities arrive to investigate." The word slammed into the passengers like a hammer. A security threat. On this plane, panic stirred again. Voices rose. People shifted nervously in their seats. Jason's small body stiffened, fear gripping him like a vice. The old woman hugged him close, whispering, "Don't worry. They'll see it's not you." But Jason's mind spun. If they already thought he didn't belong, would the authorities believe him? Or would they see only his clothes, his skin, and the planted evidence? The CEO rose again, his voice cutting across the panic. "Everyone remain calm. This will be handled. And I assure you, the truth will come out." Passengers hushed, but the tension only thickened. The word threat hung in the air like a curse. Jason closed his eyes, wishing it would all disappear. But when he opened them again, the officer was back in the aisle, speaking quietly with the attendants. His eyes flicked toward Jason, sharp and suspicious. The boy's stomach twisted. Something told him the worst was coming. And then, the cabin doors opened. 2 airport security officers stepped in, their presence heavy and commanding. One carried a radio. The other scanned the cabin with cold, assessing eyes. "Where's the suspicious bag?" one asked. The CEO pointed toward the front. "Here." The officer crouched, examined the bag, then lifted the slip of paper with Jason's name. He turned, his gaze landing on the boy. "Son," he said firmly, "you need to come with us." The passengers erupted in protest. The old woman clutched Jason, shouting, "No! He's done nothing wrong." The CEO stepped forward, blocking the aisle. His voice thundered. "You will not take him anywhere until you can prove why you think he's involved." The officers exchanged tense glances. "Sir, this is protocol," one replied. The CEO's jaw tightened. "And I am telling you, Protocol does not give you the right to drag an innocent child into this without evidence. The passengers cheered, their support ringing through the cabin. But the officers didn't back down. Their hands hovered near Jason's seat, their eyes cold and unyielding. Jason's breath came in shallow gasps. The world spun around him. His heart pounded louder than ever. And then, just as one officer reached out toward him, the lights inside the cabin flickered. Once, twice, and then with a sharp crack, the entire plane went dark. Gasps filled the cabin. Children cried. Panic surged through the passengers. Jason clung to the old woman, his small voice trembling. "What's happening?" Her voice shook as she held him close. "I don't know, sweetheart. I don't know." In the pitch-black cabin, voices shouted. Footsteps pounded and chaos swallowed the air. And in that darkness, Jason realized with chilling certainty, whatever this was, it wasn't just about him anymore. Something bigger was unfolding. Something no one could see coming. The crowd inside the airport grew louder, voices clashing like waves crashing against a stormy shore. Reporters were still outside, but now people inside, passengers, workers, and curious onlookers, were whispering about Jamal. Some were whispering in sympathy, others in judgment. "Did you hear? That boy didn't get a seat because he looked too poor." One woman told her friend. "It can't be true. No airline would do that," the friend whispered back. But then someone else added, "The CEO himself saw it. He's furious." The whisper spread like fire, and every eye seemed to turn toward Jamal. He tried to shrink into a seat beside Mrs. Turner, but he could feel the weight of their stares. His chest tightened. His hands shook as he clutched the straps of his worn backpack. Mrs. Turner placed a wrinkled, gentle hand over his. "Don't let them break you, Jamal. You've done nothing wrong. You are worth more than they can ever measure." Jamal wanted to believe her, but in his heart, the shame burned deep. It wasn't fair. He hadn't asked for this. He only wanted to fly, to see the world, to dream like anyone else. Suddenly, the tension broke when two uniformed police officers entered the terminal. Their faces were stern, their steps heavy. The chatter died instantly. "Excuse me," one officer said loudly, "we've been asked to remove a disruptive passenger." Gasps filled the air. Heads turned. People leaned forward, eager to see who it was. Jamal's stomach dropped. His eyes darted toward Mrs. Turner. "They can't mean you," she whispered, gripping his hand tighter. But then the officer pointed directly at Jamal. "You, stand up." The crowd gasped again, louder this time. "No," Mrs. Turner cried. "This boy has done nothing wrong." The officers ignored her. "Sir, please come with us. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Jamal froze. He couldn't move. His legs felt glued to the floor. "I didn't do anything," Jamal said, his voice trembling. "That's enough," one officer barked. "Stand up now." Mrs. Turner rose to her feet, blocking Jamal with her small, fragile body. "You will not take this boy. Not unless you explain to every single person here what he's accused of." The officer hesitated. People around them started recording with their phones. Some even began shouting, "Leave him alone. He's just a kid. This is wrong." The officers exchanged nervous looks. They clearly hadn't expected such resistance. One of them spoke into his radio, asking for backup. At that exact moment, a voice thundered through the terminal. "What on earth is going on here?" It was Mr. Harrison, the CEO himself. His tall frame and commanding presence cut through the chaos. He strode toward Jamal, his eyes blazing with anger, not at Jamal, but at the situation unfolding before him. "Why are you trying to remove this boy?" Mr. Harrison demanded. The officers straightened. "Sir, we were told he was causing a disturbance." "Disturbance?" Mr. Harrison's voice shook the walls. "The only disturbance I see is two officers harassing a child who was wronged by my airline." The crowd erupted in applause, cheers bouncing off the terminal walls. Phones captured every moment. The officers faltered. One muttered, "We were just following orders." "Whose orders?" Mr. Harrison snapped. "I'll have their name before the hour ends." Jamal sat frozen, his heart pounding. He couldn't believe the CEO was standing up for him, shouting in his defense. Mr. Harrison crouched down, bringing himself to Jamal's level. His tone softened. You don't have to be afraid anymore, son. No one is going to drag you out of here. Not while I'm here. Tears stung Jamal's eyes. He nodded slowly, unable to speak. Mrs. Turner placed her hand on Mr. Harrison's shoulder. Thank you. This boy needed someone powerful to protect him. Mr. Harrison stood again, turning to the crowd. This ends now. Jamal will be given the seat he deserves. And more than that, I will personally make sure he never experiences this kind of treatment again. The crowd roared with approval. But just as relief began to wash over Jamal, something happened that turned the atmosphere upside down again. From the back of the terminal, a man in a gray suit stepped forward, clapping his hands slowly. His face carried a smug smile, cold and calculated. Well, the man said loudly, isn't this a touching show of pity? But let's not pretend the boy doesn't belong exactly where he is, on the ground, not in the sky. The crowd gasped in shock. Who are you? Mr. Harrison demanded. The man smirked. Name's not important. What matters is the truth. And the truth is, people like him drag us all down. He doesn't deserve special treatment just because he looks poor. The crowd erupted in anger. Some shouted at the man. Others booed. But he stood tall, unfazed. Jamal's hands clenched into fists. His eyes filled with fire. For the first time, he wanted to stand, to speak, to fight back. But before he could open his mouth, the man in the gray suit pulled something from his pocket. A folded piece of paper. He waved it in the air. You all want to know why this boy doesn't deserve a seat? I've got the proof right here. The crowd fell silent. All eyes turned to the paper. Mr. Harrison narrowed his eyes. What proof? Hand it over. The man grinned. Oh, I'll hand it over. But when I do, you'll all see exactly why this boy should never have been allowed on a plane in the first place. Jamal's breath caught in his throat. His mind spun with fear. What could be on that paper? Why was this stranger so determined to destroy him? The terminal buzzed with tension. People whispering. Phones recording. Eyes wide with suspense. And then, in one swift motion, the man unfolded the paper, ready to reveal its dark secret. The paper shook slightly in the man's hand as he unfolded it. The crowd leaned closer, breaths held, hearts pounding. Jamal's stomach twisted into knots. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't move. Every part of him felt frozen in place. The man smirked, raising his voice so everyone could hear. This is proof that the so-called poor boy doesn't belong here. He was caught. He paused for dramatic effect, waving the paper like a weapon, trying to board without a valid seat. Gasps filled the air. Whispers exploded like sparks. That can't be true. But the CEO himself said the boy was wronged. Is he lying? Jamal's chest felt heavy. He shook his head violently. That's not true. I had a ticket. His voice cracked, desperate. Mrs. Turner placed an arm around him protectively. Don't you dare twist this child's truth, she snapped at the man. But the man only smirked more. This paper, he said smugly, is from the airline's own files. Right here it says he had no assigned seat. He held it high for the cameras flashing all around. Phones recorded. The entire terminal seemed to explode in chaos. Some shouting that Jamal was innocent, others whispering that maybe he had lied. Mr. Harrison stepped forward, his face like stone. He snatched the paper from the man's hand, scanning it quickly. Then his eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. This, Mr. Harrison said firmly, holding the paper up, is a forgery. The crowd gasped again. The man in the gray suit flinched. What? Mr. Harrison's voice rose like thunder. This document is fake. I know my company's files. I know our systems. And no child, especially this one, will be framed under my watch. The crowd erupted into cheers. People shouted in Jamal's defense. Liar! Get him out of here! Protect the boy! The man's face darkened. You don't understand, he said through clenched teeth. People like him don't belong. But before he could finish, 2 airline security officers appeared and grabbed him by the arms. He fought against them, but the crowd cheered louder as he was dragged toward the exit. "Wait!" Jamal shouted suddenly, his voice cutting through the noise. The entire terminal fell silent. Everyone turned to him, even Mr. Harrison and Mrs. Turner. Why would you do this to me?" Jamal asked, his voice trembling. "You don't even know me." The man twisted in the grip of security, his eyes cold and hateful. "Because kids like you get pity while the rest of us work for everything. You don't deserve kindness. You don't deserve a seat among us." Gasped again. Mrs. Turner held Jamal tighter. Mr. Harrison stepped forward, pointing directly at the man. "Take him out of here," the CEO commanded, "and make sure he never sets foot in this terminal again." The crowd erupted into cheers once more as the man was dragged away, his hateful words echoing faintly until they were swallowed by the noise. Jamal sat back down, shaking. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. He stared at his worn shoes, struggling to breathe. But then Mr. Harrison knelt before him again. "Listen to me, Jamal. That man's words mean nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing. You belong here. You deserve every chance that life can give you. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." Tears streamed down Jamal's face. But for the first time, they weren't just tears of fear or shame. They were mixed with something else. Hope. Mrs. Turner wiped his cheeks gently. "See, child, you are not alone. Even the powerful can stand with the poor." The terminal was still buzzing, but Mr. Harrison raised his hand and the noise quieted. He turned to face the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and strong. "Today, we saw something ugly. A child judged not by his character, not by his dreams, but by his appearance. That is not who we are. That is not who we can ever be." The crowd murmured in agreement. Some people nodded. Others clapped softly. "From this moment," Mr. Harrison continued, "I pledge that no one, rich or poor, black or white, will ever be denied dignity on my airline. Every passenger deserves respect. And Jamal here, he will be our first reminder of that promise." He turned back to Jamal, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You will fly today, Jamal. Not just in any seat, but in the front of the plane. And this time, everyone will know your worth." The crowd erupted into thunderous applause. Some people cheered Jamal's name. Others wiped tears from their eyes. Cameras flashed like stars in the night sky. Jamal's chest swelled with something new, courage. For the first time, he didn't feel invisible. He didn't feel worthless. He felt seen. The airline staff quickly arranged everything. Passengers whispered as Jamal was escorted toward the gate with Mrs. Turner and Mr. Harrison by his side. People smiled at him now, some even reaching out to pat his shoulder, as though silently apologizing for what had happened. But just when Jamal thought the storm was over, one final twist struck. As they approached the boarding gate, a staff member rushed forward, pale-faced. "Sir," she said to Mr. Harrison, "there's a problem. Someone tampered with the passenger list. Jamal's name was deleted from the system. The seat you promised him, it doesn't exist." The crowd gasped again. Jamal froze. His hands went cold. Was this nightmare never going to end? Mr. Harrison's face darkened with fury. "Who tampered with the system?" he demanded. "We don't know yet," the staff member said nervously. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Jamal's heart sank like a stone. He looked down, ready to give up again. But then Mr. Harrison turned, his voice sharp as a blade. "Then give him my seat." The crowd roared in approval. Jamal's eyes widened. "Your seat." Mr. Harrison smiled warmly. "Yes, Jamal, my seat. No one, no hacker, no fraud, no hateful man will ever take away what you deserve. You will fly today, and you will sit where I was supposed to sit." The crowd clapped louder than ever, some even shouting Jamal's name. Tears streamed down Mrs. Turner's cheeks as she whispered, "See, child, the world can be cruel, but it can also be kind. Remember this day." And so, with trembling legs but a stronger heart, Jamal walked down the jet bridge. He stepped into the airplane, his eyes wide as he entered the first-class cabin. Plush seats, shining lights, soft carpets. All of it felt like a dream. Passengers turned to look at him, and instead of judging eyes, he saw smiles. Some nodded in respect. Others whispered his name like a story already spreading. Jamal sat down in the CEO's seat. For the first time in his life, he felt not poor, not unwanted, but honored. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Mrs. Turner leaned close and whispered, "Do you understand what this means, Jamal?" He nodded slowly, tears glistening in his eyes. "It means I belong." The engines roared. The plane lifted into the sky. And as Jamal gazed out the window at the endless clouds, he realized something. No matter where he came from, no matter what he looked like, his dreams had wings. The boy who was denied a plane seat for looking poor was now flying higher than he had ever imagined, because someone finally saw his worth. And for the first time, he believed he could go anywhere, and that was just the beginning of Jamal's journey. A boy once denied for looking poor proved that dignity cannot be measured by clothes or wealth. His story reminds us that kindness and courage can lift anyone higher than they ever dreamed. If this story touched you, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you never miss more powerful stories like this one.